Hello and welcome into the KE Report. Shad and Corey here, getting an update from Erik Wetterling, also known as the Hedgeless Horseman. And we'll put a link to the Hedgeless Horseman down below this so you can follow along with Erik's work. And Erik, it's always great having you on the show just to get an update on what has your attention in the junior mining space. And we usually try to target some companies that have some recent news out. First one we want to get into that had a big press release out last week on a drill result is Goliath Resources, traded on the TSXV under the ticker GOT. And they put out a headline hole that's 226 grams per ton gold over a meter. You know, it's actually over 7 ounces of gold per ton. So a nice bonanza grade hit there. But then they also had a section that's almost 6 meters. It's about 45 grams per ton gold. So that high grade section's within there. Some people said they're kind of smearing the grade a little bit over that area, but the reality is that's a bonanza grade hole any way you slice it. Now this is in there, the Bonanza Shear area. What do you make of this press release in lieu of the prior season's drilling that you followed with Goliath?
I mean, it's kind of following the same trend. I was going to say that, I mean, the more they drilled and explored over in the shorebed zone, I mean, the better the stories become, basically. It used to be the shorebed zone or shear zone that was the main course. And then they started hitting other structures. And now they have a Bonanza Zone. There's like Golden Gate Zone, and they have found high-grade gold like a kilometer or two to the east, and they have found other VMS and high-grade gold samples on other parts of the property. So like, I mean, if you give these guys money, they could probably just keep finding stuff. And I just think that this is probably a real sweetener to have. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, they have some dimensions, etc., so people can, do their own calculations, assume an average grade, assume an average width, for example. I mean, this is obviously a great start, especially with 101 holes still to be reported. They're coming out strong, I was gonna say, and I just expect this to keep on growing. Let's say. I mean, I think this is a store that's become better and better, and I think that's why they were able to attract some smart money. I don't remember the guy's name, but he was very much behind Fireweed Metals, and he looks very correct on that one. So just to see smart money and McEwen put in more money in a store like this, that's not all you need, but it's like obviously that's an indication that they don't think this is near the end. This might be the beginning of something. So I don't know how this is going to end up. What the resource is going to be in a 12 months or 24 months, whatever. I just think that the more they drill, the more they're going to find. And so far they are able to, as we see, I mean, they're able to hit some spectacular grades at good widths as well. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they make even more discoveries while they drill out the zones they already have.
So Erik, this company has had just a lot of success. It's only been actually a few years that they've been drilling on this asset. They have hit a lot of good results. They've continued to raise money, seemingly fairly easy to continue to expand their drill programs. Now, they do have shortened drill seasons. And look, a lot of that focus has been around that Sherbet zone, the Bonanza zone, now that Golden Gate zone, maybe even this Godzilla zone. That's really the center of mass for this project. But they're drilling at some of these other areas where the ice has receded. What do you think drives the story more? Is it continuing to drill this high grade in this area where they have all this drilling and working towards a resource? Or is it these other areas, these newer areas that they can explore and are drilling now?
That's a good question. And as always, I was going to say, I don't know the right answer because I only know that in hindsight and if we had parallel universes. But I would think there's like this right now is kind of, I mean, they're showing all the potential. They're kind of, reminds me in a sense of, Great Bear or any other store, even, Newfound Gold, where it's like, okay, we don't have a resource out yet. We just keep showing the potential. We show the hits that are coming. And I think at some point, I mean, it would probably be good to have some kind of resource. But the thing is, obviously, if you have a very, let's say, a quick grower, that resource is already outdated as soon as it comes out. So it might act like an anchor in the sense that, well, okay, you put out a resource and everybody's going to treat it like, oh, this is a X million ounce project, whatever, because that's what's in the presentation. In reality, they might be, already past that, and it's like from some blue sky drilling or some, step out drilling, it's obvious it's going to be much bigger. So I guess it depends on, what investor are you catering to in a sense, because obviously the mining companies can do their own resource calculations. And if you're just pushing to a takeover, there are a few examples, but it's like it has happened that, some mining company just puts it together and it's like, okay, we'll buy this because we think it's going to be X much bigger, or it's good enough right now. So, I mean, I would say it's hard to say. I'm not 100% sure what the consensus focus is right now. I do think it might be good to do some kind of summary, because like now it's becoming so many zones, etc. It's like you got to keep track of, like you said, like the Godzilla zone, the Bonanza zone, or whatever. So you have like a few almost exploration stories in one exploration stories, and you kind of forget about the shorebed zone because the focus is on the Bonanza zone right now. So I think it kind of dilutes the focus in a sense, but at the same time, is that bad if, okay, it's the Bonanza zone that starts or keeps producing the most splashy results? Can that make the stock go up, even though it's like the market is kind of forgetting about the, the other zones, let's say? Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, that's a good question. I can't really say that I have a definite answer, because like always, there's trade-offs, and I mean, some people might sell on a resource, some might buy on a resource, and I don't know exactly what the consensus or sentiment or focus is for the marginal investor right now.
Well, we'll definitely keep following along with the story, because to your point, they keep finding new zones, and this is not the first assay this season. The first assay actually showed that they have a mothership feeder zone that seems to be more of a reduced intrusion, kind of more similar to what Snowline Gold has. And then they found that Blue Origin discovery about a kilometer and a half away, where they just did some surface work. It's also a reduced intrusion. And then they also have stuff at the Jackpot area, which is possibly a feeder zone for it, but has off the charts copper grades along with the gold. So there's so many things going on. It would be a little premature to try to put a resource and focus everybody in on one area when they're really hitting pay dirt all over the place. And we didn't even get into Treasure Island up in the Cambria ice field. So there's a lot going on with Goliath. We're actually going to have Roger on the show later this week. So for those interested, we'll hear it right from Roger's mouth as to what he thinks this drill hole means. But let's pivot over to some other big news this week, Erik. There was a takeover in the space in Nevada. We saw Borealis Mining, traded on the TSXV under the ticker BOGO, make a run at Gold Bull Resources. Now, Gold Bull Resources traded on the TSXV under the ticker GBRC, looking for somebody with deeper pockets to come as a strategic at one point, looking for someone to help them with the drill costs, because it is expensive to do those deeper holes in Nevada. But it looks like you got a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario here, where both companies putting their heads together now, and you got Borealis at the helm to help maybe some of the discovery on the resources that Gold Bull had. What do you make of this kind of a merger, where you're merging two different Nevada companies together into a larger company of mass?
I mean, this is what I really like to see. People being proactive and flexible in light of the current market conditions. Like, I know my portfolio has changed over time as the sector has changed. Like the valuations in different subsectors. Like, okay, at some point, mature plays might be overvalued, so you have to go to kind of the exploration space. And nowadays, which I've talked about many times, I think there's a lot of sunk cost value. A lot of the developers I like, where it's like, okay, you can whatever work that took 4 or 5 years to do and X amount of money, you can actually buy it for even lower than that, and you don't have to wait 4 or 5 years and X amount of placements to actually prove that it's there already. And in this case, I mean, you have one of those cases where it's like, okay, Gold Bull might not be interesting to anybody as a standalone operation, not right now at least, and it's not particularly sexy because it's not a large project, and I don't think they've been putting out that much news, because I assume they have the problem of attracting capital, like a lot of unsexy juniors in the space right now. But then you have Borealis, who, if they wanted to, could have very near-term cash flow, and they have an ADR plant that could potentially be used to mine what the small resource or the small project that Gold Bull has. And we can't forget, again, even though I would say the market kind of ignores the fact that gold price is whatever it is, 2,700. I mean, if you have a story or cases where there's a way to monetize the fact that gold is at 2,700 and the valuations of the gold projects are at not reflecting 2,700. I mean, then you're just taking advantage of the opportunities given by the market. I mean, it's worse obviously if you have no way to monetize or force that value to show up in a sense. So it's like this is the stuff I hope I would be doing if I was running a junior. Look around, it's like, okay, what is cheap right now? How can we close the price to value gap? It's like, okay, that could actually get into production. We think we could get into production. And in this case, Borealis, I mean, look at the backers and the directors and management team. I mean, there's some heavy hitters in there. So I don't think they're just blindly buying these projects like for a promotion or have no idea that it should work. I mean, yes. So, I mean, if you look at the names involved and amount of skin in the game, I think this tells me this should be a synergistic acquisition, because I don't know more about mining than those guys, and I don't have more skin in the game than those guys either. So it's like at face value, it looks like it makes sense, and given the people that made these decisions, it probably makes sense. And in that case, like you said, I mean, maybe they buy something for price X, but they can actually monetize it to or value X3 or 3X, for example. I mean, that's how you kind of take advantage of the market right now. And not everybody can do that. That's the thing.
Well, to that point, though, that this just goes back to what we keep hearing from companies and investors, that it's cheaper to buy ounces in the ground than to find them and move those through, I guess, the process of putting out a resource and economics. Gold Bull already had some economics out on this only 500,000 ounce resource, but it was showing to be very profitable. Erik, again, though, this is a smaller project, doesn't fit into the majors, so fits more into the junior game. Does that mean that you would invest in Borealis on the back end of that transaction because you see scale there? Do you go out looking for some other projects in Nevada that, who knows, other smaller companies could take over?
Well, that's a good question as well. I mean, I necessarily don't like cases where you have, we're gonna make money if someone buys this, let's say, and especially if there's no way for the junior to make it even more attractive, whatever. I mean, there's projects out there that have, on paper looked attractive for eons basically, but they end up being trading sardines, and the same project is around 20 years later, etc. I mean, I do want, especially in a time like this, I do want the companies themselves to be exciting what they can do with it. I mean, to me, it's like, okay, was Gold Bull really exciting? It's like, no, I actually tried to, I think, if I remember correctly, try to get into the last placement because it was just so cheap. So I thought, okay, just by the sentiment changing, this should actually go up. So it's like, I'm not totally against beta plays, especially at a time like this. But I am more in, well, I don't have anything in Gold Bull, I don't think, but I have shares of Borealis Mining because I see them as the movers and shakers. I mean, look at the people, they have the good backing. They have a project that could, again, I mean, they could kind of force the monetization because it's pretty much a turnkey operation because they have all the permits, et cetera, et cetera. So they have their destiny in their own hand, kind of. And in this case, it allows them to also change that in more ways than just by the asset they already have. They're actually, making lemonade out of finding other lemons. So it's like, if they like this acquisition, I like it. And it's like, is there a chance that this could actually get built and monetized? Yeah, it's supposed to be a very low capex project, for example. I don't know exactly how the permitting situation is, and I haven't really done any, economic numbers on it because I haven't honestly had time. I just think that if they did this, they probably think that they got more value than the price they paid, like we've seen for other M&A stuff happening in Nevada, be it Orla Mining, McEwen, and Integra, for example. So I just see these juniors as they just keep stealing value, basically, and they might be the only ones that can really unlock that value as well, because like you said, the majors aren't interested in this, and if you can't do anything really on your own, well, then it's up for somebody that can do this and does care about it, who can capture that opportunity. Otherwise, I mean, you're stuck.
Yeah, it's a good way of pointing it out that they're the only ones, some of these junior producers or near-term producers, that can unlock value in these projects because they're not of interest to the majors. But I think the idea with both teams was that they saw a way to potentially monetize this asset by putting it into production because of the likelihood that Borealis Mining can go into production soon and augment their production profile with the Sandman Project from Gold Bull. So definitely an interesting M&A deal in the sector. So we've talked M&A in the juniors. We've talked about a big drill hit. Now let's talk about drill targeting. There's one more company to get to here, Altamira Gold, traded on the TSXV under the ticker ALTA. Now, Erik, this one is a news release they put out on December 11th, more around a target. So they've now moved this target up the batting order because of some grab samples and some enticing geophysics and geochemical, but most of it is really the sampling they've done. Do you get excited when you see a company talking about targets? Because a lot of the market doesn't really jive with targets. They want to see drilling and they want to see assay results. But as an early mover in a play, do you like getting in when you see something new done with targeting?
Yeah, and that also is up to context. I mean, there's juniors out there where it's like, oh, we found a new target, and you might not find the target that exciting, and maybe it's in a place around the world where it's like, oh, the threshold for success is very high there, and you don't think anybody's really going to fund it, or you need to find 3 million ounces or something. It's like, good luck raising that amount of money unless you have spectacular discovery holes, let's say. So some are just long shots, even if the potential is there, but it's like, as an investor, it makes it hard to monetize said potential or unlock said potential. In this case, I mean, Altamira already has 700,000 ounces down there. They have the Maria Bonita discovery, which I don't think is really appreciated. And they just keep showing us like, hey, within this project, we're finding more and more targets. And you have the alluvial gold miners that kind of, I mean, you see in the slides, there's gold shedding from a lot of these targets. So it's like, yes, there should be gold there. They go and look, they're finding gold in grab samples, etc. So I just think, and they've done it a few news releases in a row, it's like the blue sky potential keeps getting ratcheted up. But at the same time, it's like they don't right now have the money to make themselves deadly in a sense. I mean, it's like there's no immediate perhaps threat of you not being in the stock, and they drill this and suddenly they make a discovery and it's like, oh my god, I missed it. So I'm just assuming, I might be wrong, I think they have like 2 million cash in the bank, but they also have, they should be also drilling the Maria Bonita discovery. So I think this is going to be one where as soon as they maybe take in more money, I think this is going to become quite exciting, because they already have Maria Bonita to drill, which is basically wide open, and they have several what appears to be near surface gold rich porphyries to drill as well. So I think the blue sky potential is big. I mean, the infrastructure is good. They already have 700,000 as a base. Maria Bonita, I haven't tried to do a resource on what they hit so far, but that's near surface oxide stuff, should be quite low capex, etc. So I think the threshold for success is very low. I think it's cheap. I think the blue sky is very high. So I think the risk reward in Altamira is quite nice. I just think that my belief is that, well, first of all, you don't see much excitement about target generation, like soil samples or rock chip samples, yada, yada. We see that all the time, that nobody really cares. I think that's a sign of the sentiment, basically, and the sign that's like, hey, if all these targets that put out, oh, we have this and this large scale target or this nice target, they're sitting there with 10 million in cash, like ready to drill. I think they're, it would be a different tune sung by Mr. Market, but I think this is gonna be very exciting in 2025, and I think that this is one of those cases where it's like, again, you look at what's happening in the market, because let's face it, I mean, a lot of the positive news items gets put out by juniors, they don't really matter at all in the eyes of Mr. Market. So, I mean, in a sense, as we talked about before, right now in this super depressed sentiment environment, it's almost like being an insider because you get to see the news items, the results, and even if it's potential should still have some value, especially if you think they could test that potential. And you don't even have to pay up for it. And I see some juniors where I think it's like, okay, they're kind of, ratcheting up the blue sky potential, but you don't pay anything higher for it at some point in time. It's like, yes, this is, let's say high risk, high reward target if there's no margin of safety, especially. But at some point, it's like, well, now they added quite a bit of potential. And what happens if the sentiment changes? All of a sudden, a lot of money gets flowing and people care about exploration potential, or all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, we have 4 targets that are kind of, ready to drill. So things can change. And it's like, that's what it's all about in the end. I mean, you're front running sentiment and news that has not yet happened. But in the market right now, a lot of the Mr. Market is suggesting that there's not a lot of news that's actually worth anything. I just think that that's an opinion that's held right now by Mr. Market. And like since mining began or mining stocks were a thing, I mean, that's always changed and it's begrudgingly slow, but that's going to happen at some point in time. And at the end, it's going to be all about exploration success at the peak of the sentiment.
Well, hasn't this been the story with this company so much, though, is that look at all the potential, look at this project, look at this target, we're building up this target, we don't have a ton of money to go drill. So yeah, I guess to your point, you're waiting for a sentiment change, but also the sentiment in this sector isn't the worst it ever has been. So shouldn't they take a lead at some point and somehow be able to drill this asset? Because quite frankly, look, even if they're just sitting back and saying, look at this target, they're still bleeding cash. So in a way, it is still a depreciating asset until they can go out and actually make something happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, in a sense, but it takes cash to show potential. So it's not like it's only a net negative that, oh, we're spending cash, but the share price hasn't moved up. I mean, it costs money to do all these sampling techniques and do geophysics and all of that they're doing now after they had Richard Silito down there who identified that this is actually porphyry mineralization. And that all of that costs money, but it still de-risks stuff. It helps them to evaluate, okay, where should we go looking for? Okay, if it's a copper or if it's a porphyry deposit, porphyry system, okay, they tend to show up in clusters. So then they went out and looked with a porphyry frame of mind, and lo and behold, they start finding new stuff. So it's not like this isn't valuable. It's for sure it's valuable. It's just that it hasn't shown up in price yet. But the big, obviously, at the end of the day, the big thing is that, okay, does this potential convert into something real? It's like the potential materializes in some way, shape, or form. So I think the story is getting better. And I mean, it's not like it's only for Altamira, but you have, well, especially now in tax loss silly season, so you have the share prices, they go the opposite way of the actual fundamentals, because you don't need to put a lot of value on a target like this, but it's like, yeah, the context is pretty good. 39 grams per ton gold sample at surface. You have gold shedding from the target. I don't remember how the geophysics look, but it's like, is that zero potential? Of course it is. And do I think they will get money one day to test all these targets? Yes, I do think so, because I think this is a more attractive story, even for larger companies, than Mr. Market, retail Mr. Market during tax loss silly season is suggesting. So I think this is a good story that's gotten better, that's just right now undervalued. And I think it's for different reasons, including the market maybe, knowing that, hey, if you're going to test all these good targets, you need to raise money. So even if you like the targets, especially if you like the targets, would you want to get into a placement low or high? I would prefer low.
Yeah, that's a good point, Erik, and I think a lot of people are waiting to see where's the money going to come from to fund the drilling, but it is an interesting target, and I appreciate you giving us an overview of really all 3 of these companies. We got one with a drill hit, we got one that's a junior M&A deal, and one that's got a target that wants to be drilled. but I think there's a lot of interesting news in the junior sector, and I appreciate you walking us through the ones that have your attention this week. If people want to follow along with Erik's work, definitely click on the link below this. It takes you over to thehedgelesshorseman.com, where you can follow Erik's written work as well as the videos he produces on the sector. And as always, looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, guys. The same. And as always, keep in mind, I'm biased. I own shares of these three companies, and they're also banner sponsors.